right, hello? Oh, shoot, okay. Hi, hello. Wow, that was terrible. Thank you guys for waiting. I think when the display popped up in my display settings, it was called Decimator. So I don't know who named that, but it sure like decimated my laptop. Um, my name is Emmy. We're gonna do a little bit different of a talk right now. It's gonna be about the brain, psychology. I studied CS. It stands for cognitive science, but I'm gonna let the recruiters just assume whatever they want. And I am a developer advocate at Wix. So if you're in Miami, which I'm staying in South Beach, and this is my view from the window of my hotel. I'm not going to the office for this day, but yeah, it keeps me grounded and reminded that I'm here for work. So you might have heard of us. People are always like, oh, what, developer advocate at Wix? What does that mean? I didn't know you could code. I used it like 10 years ago to make my like Pokemon card selling site or something. But yeah, you can code on Wix. We've done a lot of work with it. We have a new product called Wix Studio, which lets you basically do the same WYSIWYG editor stuff, except that you can write CSS, full stack JavaScript code, and do a bunch of other lovely, lovely stuff. So our dev features are pretty complex, anything you might want as a web dev, but other people might disagree. So developer advocate, developer relations, kind of same thing. So how are my relations with the developers, you might ask? They're not that great. So it's really not just us. It's all these kinds of no-code, low-code tools. They're all dealing with the same sorts of stuff. My friend on Twitter, she said, oh, like I'm learning WordPress right now, and she like knows React and a bunch of other languages, and someone's commented this, which is like, why, you know? So I feel for all of the customer support people. I've been real nice to people in support ever since. If you're taking a picture, I don't know if I can. No, go ahead. but whenever I talk to customer support people, I just remember like how I feel like when they talk to me, like this is who you're talking to behind the screen. I'm just sitting there with if you recognize this, get off of TikTok. So I'm sure some of you might have heard about the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the loudest people, the most confident people are they're not necessarily the ones with the most experience. As you start learning something and it starts to click, you feel like you really got it. And then you keep learning and you keep learning, and you realize you haven't even scratched the surface. So the people who are the most confident tend to be the beginners and the people who are experts. Everybody in between, you just feel like you'll never get there. And that kind of represents the tech community online as a whole. The loudest people are a very, very small minority. The regular engineers you see day to day, they're not super opinionated about like, oh, Tailwind is this, so like you should be using this or that. They don't care. They're just trying to do whatever they do. So it's a small chunk of the population. So another thing people argue about, like, what is the best thing to learn? What is the best framework to use? My personal opinion, I think the #1 skill for developers is nothing technical, but it's the ability to learn. And the field of programming has changed so much. If you learn the best thing right now, you're gonna be outclassed by those like children, the iPad kids who are probably doing, you know, like Scratch coding tutorials right now in their strollers. So you need to consistently keep learning and upskilling yourself. which is difficult, but it's not the worst. And you're kind of seeing that with AI now. Like, people are starting to accept that maybe it's okay not to do everything from scratch, and it's okay to get like a little bit of help, which is funny because that's the whole point of programming, is to make things easier, keep abstracting. Like, don't you want to like stop doing this eventually? You know, let the apps make themselves. And the good thing about the brain is that it's plastic. It's fantastic. And we don't mean it in this sort of way. We mean it as in it's really, really good at changing and adapting. And if you look at babies, iPad kids, they're going to grow up looking at a computer, and you're going to show them some, like have y'all ever tried to use, like, Blender or like Unity in software or Photoshop? There's just so many menus. I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at. But they're going to be like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to know where to click, how to get help. They've just been doing that from a very young age. Because you see, the brain is very, very good at being efficient. And if you do something from the day you start walking, it's going to be like, if you do that every day, your brain's going to be like, this is a skill that's important to your day-to-day life. I'm going to make it easy for you. We're going to make it more efficient for you to do this kind of stuff. And then that behavior becomes more automatic. The time it takes for signals to travel from your nervous system to your brain, and then for you to make a response out of it, it's drastically lower. So it might make sense that the way that this happens is through repetition. So if you keep doing something over and over, obviously you're going to be good at it. And this is the notorious example of like repeated practice in programming. There's a lot of memes going around, like, if your GitHub doesn't look like this, like, what are you doing? So is this really the best way to do things? The answer is it depends, right? So it depends, like, what are you doing on here every day? Are you working in the same repository, or are you, like a very active open source contributor who's working on multiple projects, doing little bits and pieces here and there? And there's benefits of both. If you're working on something long term, you're going to be really good at that domain. Every time you do something, you're going to add a little something else to it. If you're working in several different projects, you have the benefit, even if you're not doing things that are inherently more complex, you have the benefit of seeing things be done in different contexts, which in itself is a big, big skill. When you're thinking about repetition and practice within programming, it's important, obviously, to be intentional about it. And that means thinking about what you're doing in terms of difficulty. Are you challenging yourself? Are you doing everything in the same contexts? And then improving upon that. And a big problem in, sorry, the GIFs aren't loading because this is a different computer, but just know that there are a lot of results, okay? And the results, like why there are so many people who are like, oh no, I'm stuck in tutorial hell. I can't stop living and breathing and keep doing tutorials. It's because they're easy. Someone literally has the answers for you, and someone's choosing the resources you're going to use and the problems that you're going to solve. So if you keep doing this kinds of stuff, yeah, you're like seeing the content over and over, but it's like when you're studying for a test and you just keep rereading the same sentences in a textbook and you expect to learn something, you got to actually apply that knowledge. So don't have it all figured out. Try to figure things out on your own. And that's the way out of tutorial help. Oh, here it is, actually. Yeah, there's a lot, I told you. How to actually learn. And you might see a lot of self-help content about like this is the best way to be productive or the best way to learn so and so. But this is all scientifically proven in psychology and cognitive science to be like the objectively best ways to learn. Repetition, so testing your knowledge, making sure that you're not just seeing the information on a paper and being like, yeah, I know that, but you're pulling the information out of your brain, kind of like when you do flashcards. Adding new challenges as you go. So if you're doing something and it becomes so easy that you start like watching Netflix while you do it, you're probably doing something wrong and could be more challenged in different ways. And practicing in different contexts is also super important. A good example of this is pair programming, where you're doing the same stuff really, but with another person, and you might be thinking like, this is taking me so much longer, like why do I want to do this? And a big part of the benefit is that when you work with someone else and you hear how they think, you start getting like absorbing their workflow and thought system. And that might be completely different from yours. But the more you diversify the ways in which you can think, the better you are at solving problems. Rubber ducky programming is also a big example of this. Why it works is when you're so used to doing code, like when you're writing loops and stuff, you don't think about how you're doing it. When you talk to a little duck or just talk, you're thinking linearly. So you're not jumping to as many conclusions. You're thinking about, how did I get here? So challenge isn't only necessary for learning. It's essential for something called flow by Dr. Mihaly. I'm not going to try to say his last name. I'm going to call him Dr. C. Dr. C studied happiness, as all people who study psychology try to go do at first. And then he actually found that the key to happiness isn't just, being able to chill in bed and scroll on Twitter for hours and hours, as long as you want. It's actually highly related to work. And if you hear this thing like time flies when you're having fun, and sometimes people say it at like the office, it's like, I'm not having fun, but sometimes, your brain is having fun. If you've ever done anything, like if you're a musician or artist or something, and you get into that state where time just flies, thoughts come to you really easily, and you're just like, I am a goddamn genius at this. They gotta promote me right away. That refers to flow. And then when someone bothers you, like asks you a question, you're like out of it. That's not happening again. That's what we call flow. And one thing that you need to achieve flow, it's in the top right corner in that yellow right there. So on the x-axis, I don't know if you can see, it's skill level, and on the y-axis, it's the challenge level of whatever task you're doing. So for flow to occur, generally, you have to it has to be something you're really good at doing, but also something that is really challenging to you. And so if it's not something that's challenging enough, you might feel bored. If it's something that's too challenging, you're going to feel stuck, and then you're not going to know how to move forward. So it's all about finding the right challenge for your brain. There's a lot of other factors that play into it as well, like having well-defined challenges, having time constraints and personal interest, among a lot of other things. And that's why if you ever feel like you have no idea, first of all, if you've never felt like you have no idea what you're doing, then you're doing it wrong. Like, this is too easy for you, right? And on the other hand, sometimes you just feel like a god, because it feels good to like solve a really hard problem that you didn't think you could do before. And the human brain is wired to enjoy this kind of learning. Software engineering, you're very lucky because it offers infinite learning and challenge, and humans are intrinsically rewarded by that. I've been doing knitting lately, and And it's kind of, I have software engineer friends who are like, oh yeah, I tried to like crochet off of the woovles, if you know, you know. And it was too hard. And I was like, really? You can write code, but you can't, never mind. But it's, you know, like people have been knitting and crocheting and like basket weaving for leisure since the beginning of time. However, you know, when industrialization happened and that stuff was happening in factories, like, are they enjoying that? Probably not anymore, right? And you realize it's because it's not about, I made a sweater. It's about, I made a sweater. Like, I'm really proud of this, and this was something that I thought I couldn't do, and now I can. And when you're in this kind of state, you're in a focused state. Now, the brain has about like 2 states of thinking, dictated by the neurons that are activated in certain regions. One is the default mode network, and the other one is the task-positive network. We're going to call it the focus state and the diffuse state. So in the focus state, all of your thoughts are in one domain. You're just thinking, I don't know what he's doing, but it's like math, 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 math. And then in the diffuse state, you're more relaxed. Thoughts can come and go randomly. So it's like when you're in the shower or doing something that doesn't need focused thought. That's why I like shower thoughts is a big, big subreddit. I thought this one was kind of funny. Like, why? Who thinks about this, you know? Another example, focused, meetings, and diffuse. So that's kind of why right before you fall asleep, you are like, oh, I've been thinking about this, trying to work on this solution all week, but I got the solution just now, so I gotta get out of bed and do this right now or I'm gonna forget. How did that even happen? But diffuse thinking is where all of these ideas kind of happen. Creativity, artists don't just sit in front of a canvas and they're like, what am I gonna draw? What am I gonna draw? They're just doing something random outside, and they're like, oh, I have an idea. I'm going to go do it right now. And if you remember, like, this pinball, I love this pinball game. If you get into, like, those little round guys up top or, like, on the left side, they kind of just bounce around with each other, and you're like, I don't know where it's going to go, but it's just stuck there for a little bit. But if you hit, you know, like one of the flippers or somewhere more open, you can shoot your ball from one side to the other. And that's kind of the idea behind focused and diffuse thinking, is it's like pinball. In focused thinking, you have a thought, and it bounces around in the same domain, which is really good for solving highly technical, focused problems like math or coding, but not much else. In diffuse thinking, you have a thought, and you can go from, like, the weather is so nice today, to like, did I turn off the stove or the oven? And it just bounces around so much, and that's where creativity comes from, is the ideas of being able to freely bounce around and come to you. So that's why it's so important to take breaks frequently. You can't expect people to come out of a Zoom meeting and just have like infinite energy to code. Like, on the other hand, you also can't expect someone to just stop coding, go to a meeting, and have great ideas to come to the table. So to recap this talk, humans are born to learn. It's something we naturally enjoy. Repetition is the key to learning. And you can't just repeat things. You have to practice with a lot of intention. The flow and the focus state, which we all think is like the biggest part of programming, is challenge is a requisite. It can't be something too boring, or else it's going to just feel like absolute drudgery, right? But if you're in this flow state, then it's really easy for you to do a ton of stuff and just code for 4 hours like it never happened, and feel really good about yourself afterwards. And I think that's really the in terms of mental health, overall productivity, the best way to work. It's also why the Pomodoro technique is such a big thing. it's not about getting XYZ stuff done in 25 minutes. It's about having focus time and then forcing yourself to take a break and then forcing yourself to have more focus time. And so creativity often comes passively. It's not something you can force yourself to do. And if you're a developer, creative solutions sometimes come to you in random moments. So we need to give people those moments. Now, I understand that if you're just an engineer or you do this for fun, sometimes you don't have the flexibility of adjusting your constraints so that you're challenged, you have good breaks or anything, so which is why it's really important for managers to know about. So anybody like a manager here? Yay! Yeah, wow, lots of people. So I hope you guys take note. And if you guys are curious about how to learn, Dr. Barbara Oakley has a lot of information. She has a great course called Learning How to Learn, which has inspired much of this talk. Basically, she failed algebra as a kid, thought she was, just not a STEM kid. And at 26, she came out of the military studying Russian literature and then started studying engineering. And now she's a professor of engineering. And that's really it. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us. And yeah, if you have any questions, there's my Twitter and email. And unfortunately, I'm kind of a nerd, so I'll probably be really excited to talk to you about this kind of stuff.
I think we have time for one question. Does anyone have any questions? We have one.
I'm curious, in your experience, what would you say, interacting with people about this? What would you say is one or two things that most people tell you that they used to diffuse things in their mind?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it helps to talk to a lot of people about their experiences. What do you like? If you look at interviews and magazines and talk to artists, that's actually a great question that they always ask. Where do you find your creativity? Where do your ideas come from, right? And anything that doesn't actively use your brain, I think. For me personally, a big one is when I'm walking or commuting, driving, taking a walk. And also, I think rest is a big one for people as well. And just general self-care, meditative practices that enforce good mindful behavior, I would say. Yeah, does that answer your question? Cool.
Thank you. Let's have another round of applause.